The first time I saw him, I was scrubbing someone else's blood from his marble floor. My knees ached against the cold stone as I worked the stiff brush in circles, the acrid scent of bleach burning my nostrils. I'd been at it for hours, ever since Mrs. Venuti, the stern-faced housekeeper who'd hired me, pointed at the dark stain and said, "Make it disappear before he returns." She didn't elaborate on who he was or whose blood had spilled across the imported Italian marble. In this line of work, questions were luxuries I couldn't afford. 6 months ago, I would have been horrified. Now, I was just grateful for the job. When you're 24 with no degree, no references, and a 2-year-old daughter depending on you, you take what you can get, even if it means scrubbing mysterious stains from the floors of a mansion that whispered of danger from every shadowed corner. It's not clean enough. The voice, deep, quiet, and somehow more terrifying for its softness, froze the breath in my lungs. I hadn't heard anyone enter the vast foyer, yet suddenly he was there, looming above me like a dark planet pulling everything into its gravity. I kept my eyes down, focusing on the nearly invisible stain. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll do better. Look at me when I speak to you." My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly raised my head. The man standing over me couldn't have been more than 35, but power radiated from him like heat. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I would make in a year, tailored to fit broad shoulders and a lean frame. His features were sharp, high cheekbones, straight nose, and full lips pressed into a hard line. But it was his eyes that made my mouth go dry. Dark as espresso, they studied me with the cold calculation of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the chase. "You're new," he said, not a question, but an observation. "Yes, sir. It's my 2nd week." My voice sounded small even to my own ears. "Your name?" "Elena Reyes." He held my gaze for what felt like an eternity, and I fought the urge to look away. Something dangerous flickered behind those eyes, something that sent warning signals racing through my body. "You missed a spot, Elena Reyes." He gestured to a section of the floor I'd already cleaned 3 times. I swallowed hard. "I'll fix it right away, Mr. Salvatore," he supplied. "Dante Salvatore. This is my home." The name landed like a physical blow. Everyone in the city knew that name, whispered it, feared it. Dante Salvatore, the man who controlled everything from the docks to City Hall with brutal efficiency. They called him the Ghost, not because he was difficult to find, but because those who crossed him simply disappeared. And I was on my knees before him, scrubbing his floors. "The children who live in my properties don't go hungry," he said suddenly, his accent thickening slightly. "Yet your daughter looks thin." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you—" "I know everything about everyone who enters my home." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You live in the Westbrook Apartments, Building C, Unit 312, rent-controlled housing I acquired last month." My mouth went dry. The fact that he knew about Lily, that he'd seen her, made me feel exposed in a way that transcended physical nakedness. She's fine," I stammered. "We're fine." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in those dark eyes. "Finish here, then report to the kitchen. Mrs. Venuti will have a package for you to take home." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the marble floor I'd spent hours cleaning. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my hands trembling as I picked up the brush again. That night, I returned to our tiny apartment with a package that contained enough groceries to fill our empty refrigerator for weeks. As I tucked Lily into bed, her little body finally full for the first time in months, I wondered what price would eventually come due for Dante Salvatore's unexpected generosity. I didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 weeks later, I was assigned to clean the east wing of the mansion, the private quarters. Mrs. Venuti handed me the key card with thinly veiled suspicion. "Mr. Salvatore specifically requested you," she said, her Italian accent thickening with disapproval. "Touch nothing beyond what needs cleaning. The security cameras see everything." The warning was unnecessary. I'd spent enough time in the mansion to understand the unspoken rules. Look, but don't see. Hear, but don't listen. Know, but don't speak. The east wing was different from the rest of the house. where the main areas were designed to impress with their cold opulence. These rooms felt almost lived in, a book left open on a side table, a glass with fingerprints still visible on its surface, signs of humanity in a place that otherwise felt like a museum to wealth and power. I was changing the sheets on the massive four-poster bed when I heard the door open behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Something in the air changed when he entered a room, like the pressure dropping before a storm. "Your efficiency has been noted," Dante said, his voice closer than I expected. I turned to find him standing just inside the doorway, watching me with that same inscrutable expression. Today he wore no jacket, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to expose forearms corded with muscle. A thin scar ran along his left wrist, disappearing beneath his sleeve, evidence that even the untouchable Mr. Salvatore was human enough to bleed. "Thank you, sir," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. "You haven't asked about the food." I smoothed the silk sheets, buying time. "It's not my place to question your generosity. Look at me, Elena." I obeyed, though everything in me screamed to keep my eyes down, to make myself invisible. When I met his gaze, I was surprised to find something almost like curiosity there. "Most people want something from me," he said. "They take what I offer and immediately ask for more. Yet you've said nothing." "I have Lily to think about," I admitted. "Pride is a luxury for people who don't have children to feed." Something shifted in his expression. A softening so slight I might have imagined it. "How did you end up here scrubbing my floors?" The question caught me off guard. No one in this house had ever asked about my life before. "Bad choices," I said simply. "A man who disappeared when I got pregnant. Medical bills I couldn't pay. The usual story." "What happened to your back?" The question hit me like a physical blow. My hand instinctively reached toward my shoulder blade, where I knew the edge of a scar was visible beneath the collar of my uniform. I'd been careful, so careful, to keep them covered. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, heart pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. In 3 smooth strides, he closed the distance between us. I flinched instinctively, a reaction born from years of experience. His eyes narrowed at my response, cataloging it with cold precision. "Don't lie to me, Elena." His voice was soft, but carried an edge sharp enough to draw blood. "I saw them when you were reaching to dust the top shelf in the library. Burns, if I'm not mistaken." Shame burned through me, hot and suffocating. Those scars were my secret, the physical reminder of the worst night of my life. The night I learned exactly what Lily's father was capable of when I told him I was keeping the baby. "It was a long time ago," I whispered. Dante's expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to vibrate with a cold, controlled fury. "Who?" "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me." The possessiveness in those 4 simple words should have terrified me. Instead, something else unfurled in my chest, something dangerous and warm. "Why would you care about the scars of a woman who cleans your floors?" I asked, immediately regretting my boldness. But instead of anger, a smile ghosted across his lips. Gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Perhaps I've developed an inconvenient interest in what belongs to me." "I don't belong to you," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. His eyes darkened. "Everyone in this house belongs to me, Elena. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier your life will be." He reached out, and I fought the urge to step back as his fingertips brushed against the edge of my collar, just barely touching the raised skin of my scar. The contact sent electricity racing down my spine. "Tomorrow, you'll begin working exclusively in my private quarters," he said, withdrawing his hand. "Your pay will be doubled. Mrs. Venuti will arrange for someone to watch your daughter during your extended hours." It wasn't a request. "Why?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "Because I protect what's mine," he answered simply. "And I've decided that includes you." As he turned to leave, panic bubbled up in my throat. "Mr. Salvatore," I called after him. "The man who gave me these scars. He's still out there. If he finds us..." Dante paused at the door, looking back at me over his shoulder. The expression on his face made my blood run cold. "Not for long, Elena," he said softly. "Not for long." After he left, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. What had I done? In a moment of weakness, I'd revealed too much, drawn the attention of a man who destroyed people as casually as others might swat flies. That night, as I held Lily close and breathed in her sweet, innocent scent, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible mistake, that I'd traded one dangerous man for another far more lethal. I just didn't realize then how far Dante Salvatore would go to claim what he considered his, or that by this time next month, the father of my child would be missing, presumed dead, and I would be moving my daughter into the east wing of a mansion built on blood money and broken bones. I didn't realize that in trying to escape one cage, I'd willingly walk into another, gilded one, with a predator who would never let me leave. The first time I saw the full extent of Dante Salvatore's power, I was standing in his kitchen at midnight, desperately trying to calm my screaming daughter. "Shh, baby, please," I whispered, bouncing Lily in my arms as she wailed, her small face flushed with fever. "You'll wake the whole house." We'd been living in the East Wing for 3 weeks. The transition had happened with frightening efficiency. One day I was cleaning Dante's floors. The next I was installed in a suite of rooms larger than any apartment I'd ever lived in, with Lily in a nursery that looked like it had been plucked from a luxury magazine. I never asked how he'd arranged it so quickly. Some questions were safer left unasked. Tonight, Lily's fever had spiked suddenly, her little body burning against mine as she cried in discomfort. I'd crept downstairs to find medicine, trying not to disturb the sleeping household. In Dante's world, I'd quickly learned that inconveniencing others could have consequences. "What's wrong with her?" The voice behind me sent ice through my veins. I turned to find Dante standing in the kitchen doorway, wearing only black pajama bottoms. In the dim light, I could see scars I'd never noticed before. A roadmap of violence across his chest and shoulders. Despite everything, my eyes lingered on the lean muscle of his torso before I forced myself to meet his gaze. "She has a fever," I explained. My voice strained as Lily continued to cry. "I was looking for children's medicine. I'm sorry we woke you." Instead of the annoyance I expected, something else crossed his face. Concern, perhaps, though it seemed foreign on his sharp features. "How high?" he asked, crossing to where we stood. 102.3. It came on suddenly. Without asking, he reached out and placed his hand gently against Lily's forehead. To my surprise, she quieted at his touch, her sobs reducing to whimpers as she blinked up at him with fever-bright eyes. "My doctor will be here in 15 minutes, he said, already reaching for his phone on the counter. "At midnight? That's not necessary. Elena." My name in his mouth was both warning and caress. When I say my doctor will come, he will come, regardless of the hour. True to his word, exactly 13 minutes later, an elderly man with kind eyes and a medical bag arrived at the kitchen door, not looking the least bit surprised to have been summoned to the Salvatore mansion in the middle of the night. As the doctor examined Lily, Dante stood watching with an intensity that should have been unsettling. Instead, I found myself drawing strange comfort from his presence, solid and unwavering in the sterile light of the kitchen. "An ear infection," the doctor finally pronounced, packing away his instruments. "Common in children her age. I've brought antibiotics and something for the pain." Relief washed through me, making my knees weak. Lily had fallen asleep against my shoulder, exhausted from crying and comforted by the medicine the doctor had administered. "Thank you," I whispered, knowing the words were inadequate. "I don't know how I'll pay." The doctor waved away my concern with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Salvatore takes care of his own," he said simply. After the doctor left, I expected Dante to return to his quarters, his duty fulfilled. Instead, he gestured for me to follow him into the adjacent sitting room, where a fire still smoldered in the massive stone fireplace. "Sit," he commanded, nodding toward a plush armchair. I obeyed, cradling Lily against me as she slept. Dante poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass and handed it to me. "Drink. It will help with the shock." "I'm not in shock," I protested. Even as I accepted the glass, his lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Your hands haven't stopped shaking since you came downstairs." I hadn't noticed until he mentioned it, but he was right. I took a sip of what turned out to be very expensive bourbon, the liquid burning a path down my throat. "Why are you doing all this?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me for weeks finally escaping. The rooms, the clothes, the doctor. Why us? Dante settled into the chair opposite mine, his dark eyes reflecting the dying firelight. "When I was 5 years old, my mother fell ill with pneumonia," he said, his voice dropping so low I had to lean forward to hear him. "My father refused to call a doctor, said it would make him look weak to care so much about a woman. She died 3 days later." The admission stunned me into silence. It was the first personal detail he'd ever shared, and its significance wasn't lost on me. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "Don't be. It taught me an important lesson about power. True power isn't found in causing pain. Any animal can do that. True power is in having the ability to prevent suffering and choosing to use it." He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "I saw your scars, Elena. I saw what someone did to you because they could. Because they enjoyed your pain." My hand instinctively went to my shoulder, where the worst of the burn scars lay hidden beneath my nightshirt. "That doesn't explain why you brought us here." "Doesn't it?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Perhaps I recognized something in you. Something that called to me, or perhaps I simply wanted to show you what it feels like to be protected rather than possessed." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. Everything about Dante Salvatore screamed possession, from the way his eyes tracked my movements to the way he'd systematically removed every obstacle between us. "What happened to Lily's father?" I asked suddenly, the question that had haunted me for weeks finally finding voice. "After I told you about the scars, he disappeared." That wasn't a coincidence. Dante's expression didn't change, but something cold and deadly settled over him like a second skin. "Do you really want to know?" I thought about the man who had held me down and pressed a heated knife to my skin when I refused to get an abortion, who had threatened to take Lily away if I ever tried to leave him, who had made my life a living hell until I finally escaped with nothing but my daughter and the clothes on our backs. "No," I admitted quietly. "I don't think I do. Smart girl." The approval in his voice sent an inappropriate thrill through me. "But I need to know something else," I continued, emboldened by the bourbon and the strange intimacy of the midnight hour. "What do you want from me, Dante? Really?" His eyes darkened at the sound of his name on my lips, the first time I'd used it instead of Mr. Salvatore. He stood and moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, dropping to one knee beside my chair so his face was level with mine. "What I want," he said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face, "is for you to stop flinching when I come near you. What I want is for you to understand that not all men use their strength to break things." His fingers trailed down to the collar of my nightshirt, gently pulling it aside to reveal the edge of a scar. Unlike earlier times when shame had flooded me at the exposure, something else entirely coursed through my veins at his touch. "Your scars don't make you broken, Elena. They make you a survivor." His voice had dropped to a whisper, and I find that extremely compelling. The air between us changed, charged with something dangerous and electric. His face was inches from mine, close enough that I could feel his breath against my lips. For one wild, terrifying moment, I thought he might kiss me, and worse, that I might let him. Instead, he stood abruptly, putting distance between us. "Get some rest. The doctor will return tomorrow to check on Lily." He was gone before I could respond, leaving me breathless and confused, with a sleeping child in my arms and the lingering warmth of his touch on my skin. The next morning, a package arrived for Lily, a stuffed bear nearly as big as she was, along with a collection of children's books. There was no card, no message, but I knew who they were from. Just as I knew the designer clothes that had appeared in my closet the day after I'd moved in were his doing, or the piano that had been installed in our suite when I'd mentioned in passing that I used to play as a child. Dante Salvatore was courting me in his own strange, possessive way, through gestures rather than words, through protection rather than passion. I told myself it meant nothing to me, that I was simply taking advantage of his inexplicable interest to give Lily a better life. That when the time was right, we would leave this gilded cage and make our own way. I almost believed it, until the night of the gala. "You will attend with me," Dante informed me one morning as I poured his coffee, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. The event honors the children's hospital my family has supported for generations. I don't belong at events like that, I protested. I'm your housekeeper. His eyes flashed with something dangerous. Is that all you think you are to me? The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to face. What else would I be? He stood from the breakfast table, coming to stand so close I could smell his cologne. Bergamot and sandalwood with undertones of something darker. That's what we'll determine tonight, he said softly. A car will collect you at 7. Mrs. Venuti will watch Lily. That evening, I stood before the mirror in my suite, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at me. The dress, delivered that afternoon without explanation, was a deep emerald that made my eyes look like amber in the low light. It hugged curves I'd forgotten I possessed after years of oversized t-shirts and practical uniforms. My dark hair, usually pulled back in a practical bun, fell in loose waves past my shoulders. For the first time in years, I looked like the woman I'd been before. Before the scars, before the fear, before I'd learned to make myself invisible. When I descended the grand staircase, Dante was waiting in the foyer below, his back to me as he spoke quietly to his driver. At some signal I didn't catch, he turned, and the expression that crossed his face as he looked up at me stole the breath from my lungs. Hunger, raw and undisguised. You look beautiful, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Thank you. The words came out as a whisper as he helped me into the waiting Bentley. His hand lingered on the small of my back, sending electricity racing up my spine. The car pulled away from the mansion, and I watched Dante from the corner of my eye, struck by how different he seemed outside the confines of his home. More alert, more controlled. If such a thing were possible for a man who already exuded absolute command. 2 black SUVs flanked our car. Security, I realized with a jolt. I'd never left the estate with Dante before, had never seen this aspect of his life. People will talk, I said suddenly, anxiety fluttering in my chest, about why you brought your housekeeper to a gala. His mouth curved into that barely there smile that never failed to quicken my pulse. Let them talk. In my world, Elena, perception is a weapon. Tonight, we shape that perception to our advantage. And what perception is that? His eyes met mine in the dim interior of the car, dark and intent. That you are under my protection, that anyone who touches you, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, touches me. The implication sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. Why would anyone want to touch me? Because you're mine, he said simply. And in my world, what belongs to Dante Salvatore is always a target. The Bentley slowed as we approached a grand hotel lit up like a beacon against the night sky. Before we pulled to a complete stop, Dante reached across the space between us and took my hand in his thumb tracing slow circles against my palm. There's something you should know before we enter, he said, his voice low. There will be people there tonight who know what you were to me before, a housekeeper. Nothing more. They'll assume I've taken you as a mistress. Heat flooded my cheeks. And have you? The question hung between us, charged with possibilities I'd refused to acknowledge until this moment. That depends, he replied, his eyes never leaving mine. On whether you want to be taken. The double meaning wasn't lost on me. Before I could respond, the car door opened, and Dante stepped out, extending his hand to help me. As I emerged, flashbulbs exploded around us. Photographers capturing the arrival of the notorious Dante Salvatore and his mysterious companion. His arm slid around my waist, pulling me against his side in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Smile, he whispered against my ear, his breath warm against my skin. Tonight, you're no longer invisible. As we walked toward the entrance, I felt the weight of 100 curious stares, heard the whispered questions rippling through the crowd. Who was this woman on the arm of the city's most dangerous man? Where had she come from? What power did she hold over the untouchable Dante Salvatore? What none of them knew, what I was only beginning to understand myself, was that the real question wasn't what power I held over him. It was what power he'd already claimed over me. The ballroom glittered with wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light over women dripping in diamonds, and men whose casual conversations shaped the city's future. I felt like an imposter in their midst, despite the designer dress and Dante's hand possessively resting at the small of my back. "Stop looking like you're about to flee," Dante murmured, his lips close to my ear as he guided me through the crowd. "You belong here as much as anyone." "We both know that's not true," I whispered back. "I was scrubbing your floors a month ago." His grip tightened slightly, a subtle reminder of his strength. "And tonight you're on my arm, which makes you more powerful than half the people in this room. Remember that." Before I could respond, an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes approached us. Though he smiled, there was nothing warm in his expression, just calculation and barely disguised curiosity. "Dante," he greeted, his accent thick and Eastern European. "What a pleasant surprise. You rarely grace these events with your presence." "Victor." Dante nodded, his posture subtly shifting, becoming more guarded, more predatory. "The children's hospital is worth the inconvenience." Victor's gaze slid to me, assessing in a way that made my skin crawl. "And you've brought company. How unusual." "Elena," Dante said. "This is Victor Petrov. He controls the shipping routes north of the city." The introduction was pointed, a reminder of business boundaries rather than a social pleasantry. "Charmed," Victor said, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips before I could pull away. "I wonder where Dante has been hiding such a beautiful creature." "In plain sight," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't locked away. Victor's eyebrows rose, and beside me, I felt rather than heard Dante's quiet approval. "Indeed," Victor said, releasing my hand. His eyes hardened as he turned back to Dante. "Speaking of valuable things, we should discuss the situation at the docks, privately." "Not tonight," Dante replied smoothly. "Tonight is for charity, not business." A flash of annoyance crossed Victor's face. "The matter is time-sensitive. Your absence from certain conversations has been noted." Something dangerous flickered in Dante's eyes. "Careful, Victor. Noting my activities too closely could be hazardous to your health." The threat hung in the air between them, wrapped in the veneer of polite conversation, but unmistakable in its intent. I fought the urge to step back, suddenly aware I was standing between two predators. "Perhaps I'll call on you tomorrow then," Victor conceded, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. He turned to me, inclining his head slightly. "Elena, I hope we'll meet again soon." As he melted back into the crowd, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "He doesn't like me. He doesn't know what to make of you," Dante corrected, guiding me toward the bar. "Which makes you a variable he can't control. Men like Victor fear what they can't control. And men like you?" I asked, accepting the champagne flute he handed me. His lips curved slightly. "Men like me eliminate what we can't control, or we possess it so completely that control becomes irrelevant." The words sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder that the man beside me, with his gentle touches and protective gestures, was still the same man who made people disappear without a trace. "Is that what you're doing with me?" I asked, the champagne making me bold. "Possessing me so completely that you don't need to control me?" His eyes darkened as they fixed on mine. "Do you feel controlled, Elena?" The question gave me pause. In the weeks I'd lived under Dante's roof, he'd never once raised his voice to me, never threatened, never demanded. He'd given Lily and me everything we could possibly need or want. The cage he'd built was so beautiful, so comfortable. I sometimes forgot it was a cage at all. I hesitated, searching for the right word. "Protected. There's a difference," he said softly. "Is there?" I challenged. "Protection requires power, the power to keep others away, the power to decide what's best for me. How is that different from control?" Instead of answering, Dante set down his untouched drink and held out his hand. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request, but I took his hand anyway, allowing him to lead me to the center of the ballroom where other couples moved in time to the orchestra's waltz. His arm circled my waist, drawing me against him with a possessiveness that should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself melting into his embrace, my body fitting against his as though designed for that purpose. "Control," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear, is restriction. It's punishment and reward, action and consequence. Protection. His hand splayed against my lower back, warm through the thin fabric of my dress, is freedom within boundaries, the freedom to live without fear, to grow, to want. And which do you prefer? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes held mine, dark and intent. With you? Neither. What then? His grip tightened almost imperceptibly. Devotion. The word hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to face. Before I could respond, the music ended, and Dante guided me from the dance floor, his hand never leaving the small of my back. Throughout the evening, I watched him navigate the crowd with the calculated precision of a chess master, charming when necessary, intimidating when useful. Everyone wanted something from him, a moment of his time, a business favor, a political alliance. And through it all, he kept me at his side, a statement I was only beginning to understand. It was well past midnight when we finally left, the Bentley gliding through empty streets as I watched city lights blur past the window. The silence between us was charged with unspoken words, questions I didn't dare ask, answers he wasn't ready to give. When we arrived back at the mansion, Dante walked me to my suite, stopping at the door. "Did Mrs. Venuti say how Lily was tonight?" I asked, suddenly desperate to break the tension between us. "She slept through the evening. No fever." His eyes hadn't left my face since we entered the house. "You should check on her." I nodded, reaching for the doorknob, only to feel his hand close gently around my wrist, stopping me. "Elena." My name in his mouth was both question and command. I turned back to him, heart pounding against my ribs. "Yes, tonight, when Victor looked at you, when they all looked at you, do you know what they saw?" I shook my head slightly. "They saw a woman who holds power over me." His thumb traced slow circles against my pulse point. A woman I would kill for. The admission should have terrified me. Instead, heat pooled low in my stomach, a dangerous want I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "Is that true?" I whispered. His answer was to lean forward, his lips brushing against my ear. "Go check on your daughter, Elena. We'll finish this conversation another time." Then he was gone, leaving me breathless and confused at my own door. I should have known our fragile peace couldn't last. The warning came 3 days after the gala, delivered in the form of a small ivory envelope addressed to me personally. I was sitting in the garden, watching Lily chase butterflies across the manicured lawn, when Mrs. Venuti appeared with the mail. "This arrived for you," she said, her tone making it clear she disapproved of anyone sending correspondence to me at the Salvatore mansion. The envelope contained a single photograph, me entering the mansion with Lily in my arms, taken from a distance but clear enough to recognize us both. On the back, written in elegant script, were the words, "What would Dante Salvatore do to keep you safe? We're eager to find out." Ice flooded my veins as I stared at the threat in my hands. Someone had been watching us. Someone knew about Lily. Someone was planning to use us against Dante. I should have gone to him immediately. Instead, panic and instinct took over. The same instinct that had kept Lily and me alive when her father had tried to hurt us. I ran. It was almost too easy. Mrs. Venuti had gone inside, and the security guard who usually patrolled the garden had stepped away to take a call. I scooped Lily into my arms, grabbed my purse, and slipped through the gate that led to the service road. A passing taxi took us to the bus station. By the time anyone at the mansion noticed we were gone, we were already crossing the city line, headed for my cousin's house 3 towns over. I knew it was futile. If Dante wanted to find us, he would. But the need to protect Lily overwhelmed rational thought. I had to get her away from the danger I'd unwittingly brought into her life. My cousin Marta asked no questions when we appeared on her doorstep, though her eyes widened at the sight of my designer clothes and the thick roll of cash in my wallet, money I'd been saving from my generous salary. "Just for a few days," I promised. "Until I figure things out." Marta, who'd taken me in once before when I was fleeing Lily's father, simply nodded and showed us to her spare room. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat by the window watching shadows move across the street. Every passing car made my heart race. Every distant sound could be footsteps approaching, I knew it was only a matter of time. I was right. The black Bentley pulled up outside Marta's modest home at precisely 2:13 a.m. I watched from the window as Dante emerged, his face a mask of cold fury even in the dim streetlight. He was alone, no security, no driver, which somehow made his presence more terrifying. I met him at the door before he could knock, not wanting him to wake the household. "How did you find me?" I asked, though the question was pointless. Dante Salvatore could find anyone he wanted. His eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, rage and something else, fear simmering just beneath the surface. "You're mine," he said simply, as though that explained everything, and perhaps it did. "We need to leave," I whispered, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door closed behind me. "Someone's watching us. Someone sent a threat. I know," he interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "Viktor Petrov's men have been following you for days. When you disappeared from the garden, they followed you here. Horror washed over me. You knew about the threats and didn't tell me. I didn't know they'd contact you directly." A muscle ticked in his jaw, a mistake I won't make again. "Dante, you ran!" The accusation cut through the night air between us. "I gave you everything. Safety, security, a future for your daughter, and you ran from me. I ran because I was trying to protect Lily." My voice rose despite my effort to stay quiet. "I ran because being associated with you put a target on her back." Something flashed in his eyes, hurt, quickly masked by anger. "And you think you can protect her better than I can? You think running to your cousin's unguarded home in the middle of the night was protecting her? I think I'm her mother, and it's my job to keep her safe." "From me?" he demanded, stepping closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "From the consequences of being important to you," I corrected, standing my ground despite the thundering of my heart. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving mine. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Get your daughter, Elena. We're going home." "And if I refuse?" The look he gave me was both tender and terrifying. "Then I'll remind you exactly what it means to belong to Dante Salvatore." Something in his tone sent heat racing through me, a primal response to the raw possession in his words. For a moment, I considered defiance. Imagined telling him that Lily and I would make our own way, that we didn't need his protection or his possessiveness. But the image of the photograph flashed through my mind, the threat implicit in those carefully written words. Whoever had sent it wouldn't stop because I'd left the mansion. If anything, we were more vulnerable now. "Give me 5 minutes," I said finally. Relief flickered across his face, so brief I might have imagined it. 3, he countered. "And Elena." His hand caught my wrist as I turned toward the door. "Don't make me come in after you." 15 minutes later, we were in the Bentley, Lily still miraculously asleep in the car seat that had appeared as if by magic. I sat rigid beside Dante, the silence between us heavy with unspoken accusations. "You frightened me," he said finally, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "When Mrs. Venuti told me you were gone, I thought Petrov had taken you." The admission stunned me. I'd never heard Dante confess to fear before. Hadn't been sure he was capable of it. "I'm sorry," I whispered, meaning it. I panicked. His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers interlacing with a gentleness that belied the fury I'd seen earlier. "Don't ever run from me again, Elena. If you're afraid, if you're threatened, if you're uncertain, come to me. Always to me." I knew I should pull my hand away, maintain some semblance of the boundary between us. Instead, I found myself holding on tighter. "What happens now?" I asked. "With Petrov?" Dante's expression hardened, the brief vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Now I remind Victor why crossing me is a death sentence." The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder that the man beside me, whose hand held mine with such tenderness, was still capable of unspeakable violence. "Will there be blood on your floors again?" I asked quietly. His eyes met mine briefly, dark and unreadable in the dim light of the car. "Not this time." He squeezed my hand gently. "This time there won't be anything left to clean up." As the Bentley glided through the night toward the mansion that had become our home, I realized with startling clarity that I was no longer afraid of Dante Salvatore. I was afraid of what I felt for him. Afraid of the way my heart raced when he entered a room. Afraid of how safe I felt in his presence, despite knowing what he was capable of. Most of all, I was afraid of the growing certainty that I didn't want to run anymore. Not from him, not from this life, not from the dangerous, consuming feeling that had taken root in my chest. Because somewhere between scrubbing his floors and sitting beside him in his car, I'd begun to crave the very cage I'd once feared. When we returned to the mansion that night, Dante carried Lily to her bed himself. I watched from the doorway as he laid her down with unexpected gentleness, his large hand smoothing her dark curls from her forehead. "She looks like you," he observed quietly, his eyes tracing her small features. "Everyone says that." I moved to stand beside him, drawn by the tenderness in his expression, a side of him so few people ever saw. "Good." His voice dropped lower. "It means there's nothing of him in her." The simple statement carried such weight. Acknowledgement of the pain in my past and fierce protection of my daughter's future in one breath. After tucking Lily in, Dante led me not to my suite, but to his private study. A room I'd cleaned but never been invited to enter as anything but staff. The space embodied him perfectly. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the expansive grounds. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a side table, catching the low lamplight. "Drink," he said, pouring 2 glasses and handing one to me. "You need it." I accepted without argument, the events of the day catching up with me as exhaustion settled deep in my bones. The whiskey burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from the inside. "We need to discuss what happens next," Dante said, watching me over the rim of his glass. "With Petrov?" "With us." The 2 simple words hung in the air between us, charged with possibility. I took another sip of whiskey, buying time to gather my thoughts. "I don't know what you want me to say," I admitted finally. Dante set his glass down and closed the distance between us, taking my face in his hands with a gentleness that belied the strength I knew he possessed. "Say you'll stay," he murmured, his eyes never leaving mine, not as my housekeeper, not as a woman under my protection, but as mine, Elena. Completely mine. My heart hammered against my ribs, his proximity making it difficult to think clearly. "And what does that mean exactly, to be yours?" "It means no more pretending." His thumb traced the curve of my cheek, sending electricity racing along my skin. "No more separate suites, no more boundaries between us. And Lily? She's been mine since the moment you both crossed my threshold." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited something warm and dangerous in the pit of my stomach. "Dante." Whatever I might have said was lost as his mouth claimed mine, the kiss at once gentle and devastating. His lips moved against mine with practiced skill, coaxing rather than demanding, though the barely restrained power behind the gesture was unmistakable. I should have pulled away, should have reminded myself who he was, what he was. Instead, I found myself melting against him, my body betraying every rational thought as my arms wound around his neck. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, his eyes had darkened to obsidian. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll never touch you again." The choice hung between us, the last semblance of control he was offering me. In that moment, with his taste on my lips and his hands gentle at my waist, there was only one answer I could give. "Don't stop," I breathed, and watched his expression transform with hunger. What followed was a blur of sensation. His mouth hot against my neck, my back pressed against the bookshelf as his hands explored my body with reverent possession. When he finally carried me to his bedroom, laying me across sheets that smelled of sandalwood and him, I surrendered completely to the tide of feeling that had been building since the first moment I'd seen him. "You're mine now, Elena," he whispered against my skin, the words both promise and warning. "And I protect what's mine." Later, as we lay tangled in silk sheets, my head resting on his chest, I traced the scars that mapped his torso, evidence of a violent life I was only beginning to understand. "Will you ever tell me how you got these?" I asked, my finger following a particularly vicious scar that curved from his collarbone to his sternum. His hand caught mine, bringing my fingers to his lips. Some stories are better left untold. And Petrov? I couldn't help asking. What will happen to him? Dante's expression hardened, the lover receding as the dangerous man I'd first met resurfaced. He threatened what belongs to me. There's only one possible outcome for that. A shiver ran through me, not entirely of fear. You'll kill him? I'll destroy him, he corrected. Completely. Irreversibly. His business, his reputation, his life. All of it gone by this time tomorrow. The cold certainty in his voice reminded me of what I'd chosen, of who I'd chosen. Dante Salvatore, who commanded an empire built on blood and power, who could be gentle with my daughter one moment and order a man's execution the next. Does that frighten you? He asked, studying my reaction with those perceptive dark eyes. I considered lying, but he would see through it instantly. Yes, I admitted, but not the way it should. His lips curved into that rare, genuine smile that made my heart skip. Good. A healthy fear will keep you alive in my world, Elena. Is that what this is now? Your world? His hand cradled my face, thumb brushing across my lower lip. Our world. And I'll burn down anyone who tries to take it from us. The words were both beautiful and terrible. A promise of protection wrapped in violence. Yet as I drifted to sleep in his arms, I couldn't deny the sense of rightness, of belonging that had settled over me. For better or worse, I had chosen my cage and the man who held the key. The peace we found that night lasted exactly 27 hours. I was in the garden with Lily, watching her chase butterflies across the manicured lawn, when Mrs. Venuti appeared at my side, her usually stern expression replaced with something that might have been concern. Mr. Salvatore requires you in his study, she said, her accent thickening with tension. Immediately. Something in her tone sent alarm racing through me. What's happened? Her eyes flickered to Lily. I'll watch the child. Go. Now. I hurried through the mansion, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. When I reached Dante's study, the door was ajar, voices carrying from within. Dante's, cold with controlled fury, and another I didn't recognize. I knocked once, then pushed the door open to find Dante standing behind his desk, his posture rigid with tension. Across from him stood a man in an expensive suit, his back to me. Elena. Dante's eyes met mine, something like warning flashing in their depths. Come in and close the door. As I stepped further into the room, the visitor turned and the floor seemed to drop from beneath my feet. The face that had haunted my nightmares for years. Sharp features, cold blue eyes, cruel mouth, smiled at me with practiced charm. Hello, Elena, said the father of my child. It's been a while. My throat closed, panic stealing my voice as my eyes darted frantically to Dante. This wasn't possible. David was supposed to be gone, disappeared, or worse. Dante had promised me. What are you doing here? I finally managed, hating the tremor in my voice. David's smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. Is that any way to greet the father of your child? After all this time, Mr. Reed claims he's been searching for you, Dante said, his voice deceptively calm. Only the murderous glint in his eyes betrayed his fury, for the daughter, he says, was stolen from him. Understanding crashed over me like ice water. David hadn't come for me. He'd come for Lily. My hand instinctively went to the scar on my shoulder, the memory of that night burning fresh in my mind. You have no right, I whispered, my fear giving way to anger. You wanted me to abort her. You held me down and... My voice broke. Ancient history, David waved dismissively. I've changed, gotten help for my anger issues. I have rights, Elena. Legal rights to my daughter. You threatened to kill her if I didn't get rid of her, I spat, finding strength in my rage. You burned me when I refused. David's expression didn't change, but something ugly flashed in his eyes. Allegations without proof, from a woman with documented mental health issues. I have witnesses who'll testify to your instability during our relationship, Elena. Who do you think a judge will believe? Horror washed over me as I realized what he was doing. He didn't care about Lily, had never cared about her. This was about control, about punishing me for escaping him. "That won't happen," Dante interjected, his voice deadly soft. "Elena and Lily are under my protection now." David turned to him with practiced insolence. Yes, the notorious Mr. Salvatore. I've heard all about your arrangement with my former girlfriend. Tell me, how much did you pay for her? She always did have a talent for attaching herself to wealthy men." I saw the exact moment Dante's control snapped, a subtle shift in his posture, a darkening of his eyes that promised violence. Before he could move, I stepped between them, my hand pressing against Dante's chest. "Don't," I pleaded quietly. "Not like this." His eyes met mine, rage warring with the promise he'd made me, to protect us, to keep us safe. With visible effort, he reined in his fury. "You have 10 seconds to leave my property," Dante told David, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Before I forget, my lady asked me for restraint." David's smirk faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I'm not going anywhere without seeing my daughter. I have a court order. A court order that hasn't been served properly," Dante interrupted. "That hasn't been reviewed by my team of attorneys. That will be tied up in legal challenges for years before it ever touches Lily." A flash of uncertainty crossed David's face, quickly replaced by calculated confidence. "You can't keep her from me forever, Salvatore. I have resources too, connections. I know things about your operation that would interest certain federal agents." The threat hung in the air, blatant and dangerous. Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt the tension radiating from him like heat. "Be very careful with your next words," Dante warned softly. "Threats in my house rarely end well for the one making them." David's eyes slid to me, cold and calculating. "I'll see you in court, Elena, and I'll take Lily one way or another. She belongs with her father." He turned to leave, pausing at the door to deliver one final barb. "I always knew you'd end up as some rich man's whore. At least you found one who can afford better security than the last." The door closed behind him, and the control Dante had been maintaining shattered. With a roar of fury, he swept everything from his desk. Crystal decanter, laptop, stacks of papers, sending them crashing to the floor in an explosion of glass and fury. I stood frozen, shock and fear battling within me as I watched the man I'd given myself to transform into something terrifying and primal. This was the Dante Salvatore the outside world knew, the man who destroyed his enemies without mercy or hesitation. "He won't touch her," Dante snarled, his eyes black with rage. "He won't come within 1,000 yards of either of you." "How did he find us?" I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself as tremors began to shake my body. "How did he know where we were?" Dante crossed to me in 3 quick strides, his hands gentle as they framed my face despite the fury still evident in every line of his body. "Petrov," he said grimly. "This is his counter move. He couldn't get to me directly, so he found the one person who could hurt you most." "But how?" "Money," Dante said simply. "Enough money can find anyone, Elena, even a man who disappeared." Cold realization settled over me. "You didn't kill him." It wasn't a question. "When I told you about the scars, about what he did, you didn't kill him." Something like regret flashed across Dante's face. "I had him beaten, warned, paid to stay away from you and Lily forever." His jaw tightened. "A mistake I won't repeat." Fear clutched at my chest, not for myself, but for the man before me. "Dante, no. If anything happens to him now, after he threatened you publicly, came to your house, I don't care." He interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I let him live once, and he came back to threaten what's mine. There won't be a second chance." Panic rose within me as I realized what he was planning. "They'll connect it to you. They'll take you away from us." His expression softened slightly as he looked down at me. "No one takes me from what's mine, Elena. Not the police. Not the feds. No one. Please," I whispered, clinging to his shirt. "There has to be another way." For a long moment he studied my face, conflict evident in his eyes. Then, with visible effort, he reined in his rage. 3 days, he said finally. "I'll give my lawyers 3 days to handle this legally, if they can't make him disappear through the courts." His expression hardened. "Then I'll make him disappear my way." Relief flooded me, temporary though it might be. Thank you. His hand stroked my cheek, a gesture at once tender and possessive. Don't thank me yet, Elena. One way or another, the father of your child will be gone from your life by the end of the week. The only question is whether he'll be breathing when he goes. As he pulled me against his chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my ear, I realized with startling clarity that I didn't care which option Dante chose. All that mattered was keeping Lily safe, protecting her from the man who'd threatened her life before she was even born. And if that protection came with blood on Dante Salvatore's hands, I would learn to live with it. Because somehow, between the scars and the fear and the desperate need for safety, I'd fallen in love with the most dangerous man in the city. A man who called me his, who would kill to protect what belonged to him. A man who might lose everything, his freedom, his empire, his life, because of the choice I'd made to stay. I'll take Lily and go, I whispered against his chest. Somewhere he can't find us. You can arrange it. New identities. A new life. Dante pulled back, his expression darkening. You would leave me? To protect you, I insisted. If David disappears after threatening you publicly, they'll come for you, Dante. I can't let that happen because of us. His hand tangled in my hair, tilting my face up to his. No one takes what's mine, he repeated, each word precise and deadly. Not him, not the law, not even you, Elena. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited that dangerous warmth in my chest again. The certainty that I belonged to this man, completely and irrevocably. Then we face this together, I said, making my choice once and for all. Whatever comes. His answer was to kiss me, fierce and claiming, as though sealing a pact between us. When he pulled away, his eyes were still dark with rage, but something else burned alongside it now, a devotion as dangerous and consuming as his fury. Together, he agreed, his forehead resting against mine, until the end, whatever that may be. As I stood in his arms, surrounded by the destruction of his rage and the promise of his protection, I knew I'd crossed a final line. There would be no going back from this, no pretending I was just a woman under his roof, just a mother seeking safety for her child. I had become what the whispers at the gala had already named me, Dante Salvatore's woman, the one he would kill for, the one he might die for, and God help me, I wouldn't have it any other way. The next 3 days passed in a haze of tension and waiting. Dante's mansion transformed into a fortress. Additional security posted at every entrance, guards shadowing Lily and me whenever we left our rooms. I barely saw Dante himself, as he disappeared into his study with a rotating cast of men in expensive suits, some lawyers, some clearly not. On the evening of the third day, I put Lily to bed early, exhausted from the constant vigilance. As I sang her favorite lullaby, smoothing her dark curls away from her forehead, a shadow in the doorway caught my attention. Dante stood watching us, his expression softer than I'd seen it since David's visit. He'd loosened his tie, and fatigue lined his face in a way I rarely witnessed, a reminder that even he had limits. She's beautiful when she sleeps, he said quietly as I joined him in the hallway, pulling Lily's door half closed behind me. She's always beautiful, I replied with a tired smile. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing across my cheekbone with surprising tenderness, like her mother. Something in his tone made my heart tighten. What's happened? I asked, suddenly alert. Did the lawyers... Let's go to my study, he interrupted gently. We need to talk. Fear clutched at my chest as I followed him down the hallway. In my experience, nothing good ever followed those 4 words. Dante's study had been restored to its former pristine state. No evidence remained of his explosive rage days earlier. He poured us each a drink without asking, and I accepted mine gratefully, needing the liquid courage. The legal approach has hit a wall, he said without preamble, leaning against his desk rather than sitting behind it. David Reed has powerful backing, money that isn't his, influence he shouldn't possess. Petrov, I whispered, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. Dante nodded, his expression hardening. Victor sees you as my weakness. By supporting Reed's claim to Lily, he hopes to distract me, destabilize my operation. It's a power play, nothing more. And David? The name still burned like acid in my mouth. He wants money. Dante's voice was flat with disgust. He doesn't care about Lily, never did. This is about extortion, pure and simple. Relief and anger warred within me. So, pay him off, make him sign away his rights and disappear for good. Dante's expression darkened. I offered $2 million, more than enough to vanish permanently. He refused. Why? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Because Petrov has promised him more. Dante set his glass down with controlled precision. And because he wants to hurt you, Elena. Men like Reed, men who burn women and threaten children, they need to dominate, to control. You escaped him once. He won't let it happen again. Cold dread settled in my stomach. What happens now? Dante pushed away from the desk, moving to stand before me. His hands framed my face, gentle despite the violence I knew they were capable of. Now I keep my promise, he said softly. Now I make him disappear. Despite everything David had done, the pain, the fear, the scars, both physical and emotional, I felt a flicker of hesitation, not for his sake, but for Dante's. There has to be another way, I said, though I knew there wasn't. The police would need evidence of his abuse, Dante interrupted gently. Evidence that doesn't exist because you never reported it, because you were too afraid, too isolated. Shame burned through me at the reminder of my weakness, how I'd hidden the burns, made excuses for the bruises, kept silent about the threats. It's not your fault, Dante continued, reading my expression with practiced ease. Survivors do what they must, but legally, without documentation, your word against his isn't enough, especially with Petrov's lawyers painting you as unstable. And if you kill him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What happens to us then? Something shifted in Dante's expression. A softening. A vulnerability I rarely glimpsed. I have a confession to make, Elena. He took my hands in his touch uncharacteristically hesitant. I've been planning for this moment since the day you told me about your scars. Confusion furrowed my brow. What do you mean? Reed's disappearance was always inevitable, he explained. From the moment I understood what he'd done to you, what he'd threatened to do to Lily, his fate was sealed. The only variable was timing. Then why wait? I asked. Why give him the chance to find us? Because I needed you to choose me, he said simply. Not just as protection, not just as safety, but as the man you wanted. I needed to know you'd stay when he was gone, that you weren't with me only because you were running from him. The admission stunned me into silence. All this time, I'd believed Dante had spared David out of some misplaced mercy, some attempt to keep his hands clean for my sake. The truth was both simpler and more complex. He'd been waiting for me to give myself to him completely. And now? I asked, my voice unsteady. Now everything is in place, he said, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of my hands. A hunting accident in the mountains, a body that will never be found, witnesses who'll swear I was here, with you, when it happened. The clinical precision with which he described murder should have horrified me. Instead, I felt only a terrible, overwhelming relief, the promise of freedom from the shadow that had haunted us for years. No one will ever connect it to you. I needed reassurance, not for my conscience, but for our future. No one, he promised. Not even Petrov, though he'll suspect. But suspicion isn't proof, and without Reed to manipulate, his leverage is gone. I searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt, any indication that he wasn't certain of success. I found none, only that calm, deadly confidence that had drawn me to him from the beginning. When? I asked, the single word carrying the weight of my consent. Tonight. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, tucking it behind my ear with surprising tenderness. It's already in motion. I should have felt something. Horror, guilt, fear. Instead, I felt only the certainty that this man would do anything to protect what was his, that he'd kill without hesitation to keep Lily and me safe, and God help me. I loved him for it. There's something else, Dante said, his expression shifting subtly. Something I need to ask you before this is done. My heart stuttered in my chest as he reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. With a grace that belied his size and strength, He dropped to one knee before me. "Elena Reyes," he said, opening the box to reveal a diamond ring that caught the light like captured fire. "When this is over, when you and Lily are truly safe, will you be my wife?" Tears blurred my vision as I stared down at him, this powerful, dangerous man on his knees before me. The question shouldn't have surprised me. Dante Salvatore claimed what was his, completely and permanently. Yet somehow the formal declaration stole the breath from my lungs. "You want to marry me?" I whispered, scarcely believing the words even as I spoke them. "I want to give you my name," he replied, his eyes never leaving mine. "I want Lily to be my daughter in every way that matters. I want the world to know that you belong to me, and I to you." There were 1,000 reasons to refuse. His world of violence and power, the blood on his hands, the enemies who would always see us as leverage against him, yet in that moment, none of them mattered. "Yes," I said, the word escaping on a breath. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile, rare and genuine, transformed his face as he slid the ring onto my finger. The diamond was enormous, ostentatious in a way that would have embarrassed me months ago. Now I recognized it for what it was. A declaration of possession, a warning to others, a promise of protection. Dante rose to his feet, pulling me against him in a kiss that was at once tender and claiming. When he finally broke away, his expression had shifted back to dangerous resolve. "Wait for me in our bed," he murmured, his hands lingering at my waist. "This will be over by morning." As I watched him leave the study, phone already at his ear as he issued quiet commands, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Tonight, David Reed would disappear from our lives forever. Tomorrow we would begin a new chapter, not as the broken woman who'd scrubbed blood from Dante's floors, but as the future Mrs. Salvatore. The cage had become a fortress, and I had finally stopped fighting the bars. Dante didn't return until dawn, slipping into our bed as the first pale light filtered through the curtains. I stirred at his presence, reaching for him instinctively. "Is it done?" I whispered into the dimness. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the solid warmth of his chest. "It's done," he confirmed, his voice carrying the finality of an executioner's swing. "He won't trouble you or Lily ever again." Relief washed through me, so profound it bordered on physical pain. For the first time since Lily's birth, the shadow of fear that had followed us everywhere was gone. "And Petrov?" I asked, knowing the danger hadn't entirely passed. Dante's hand stroked the length of my spine, soothing despite the violence I knew it had just orchestrated. "A message has been sent. He'll retreat, regroup. But he won't move against us directly again." "How can you be sure?" His lips brushed my forehead, unexpectedly gentle. "Because in this world, Elena, there are lines even men like Victor won't cross. He tested my boundaries, found them unyielding, and lost a valuable asset in the process. He's a businessman at heart. He won't risk further losses for a vendetta." I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him for Lily's sake. "And if he does?" Dante's arms tightened around me, protective and possessive. "Then I'll destroy him too," he said simply. "Anyone who threatens my family forfeits their right to exist in my world." Family. The word echoed in my mind, sweet and powerful. Somehow, in the chaos of blood and fear and desperate need for safety, we had formed something I'd never truly had before. A family built on protection rather than pain, on possession rather than control. "When do you want to get married?" I asked, changing the subject to something brighter, something that looked toward future rather than past. I felt Dante's smile against my hair. "As soon as possible. A month, perhaps 2 for preparations. Nothing extravagant, just family and my closest associates." The casual mention of family gave me pause. "Do you have family? You've never mentioned them." A moment of silence followed, long enough that I thought he might not answer. "A sister," he said finally, "in Milan with her husband and children. We speak rarely, for her safety more than mine." I absorbed this new information, this glimpse into the man behind the power. "Will she come for the wedding?" "She'll come," he confirmed. Francesca has been waiting a long time for me to find someone worth bringing into the family. Warmth bloomed in my chest at the thought that I might be worthy of such consideration. that this powerful, dangerous man had chosen me not just for my body or my vulnerability, but for something deeper. "And Lily," I asked, "will you adopt her?" Dante shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me, his expression serious in the growing light. "If you'll allow it. I want her to have my name, my protection, my legacy. I want to be her father in every way that matters." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. The image of Dante, who could order a man's death without flinching, teaching Lily to ride a bike, reading her bedtime stories, walking her down the aisle someday, was almost too much to bear. "She already loves you," I whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "She lights up when you enter a room." Something vulnerable flashed across his features, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "And you, Elena? Do you love me? Not just for the safety I provide, not just for what I can give you, but for who I am." The question caught me off guard. Dante Salvatore, who commanded an empire with absolute authority, who killed without hesitation to protect what was his, was asking if I loved him, as though there was any doubt. "Yes," I answered, the truth of it settling in my bones. "God help me. I love every part of you, even the parts that terrify me." Relief softened his expression, and he lowered his mouth to mine in a kiss that was surprisingly gentle. "Good," he murmured against my lips, "because I've loved you since the moment I saw you scrubbing my floors. So determined, so broken, yet still fighting." We made love as the sun rose, his touches gentle despite the night's violence, as though reminding both of us that his hands could create pleasure as easily as they dealt death. Afterward, as we lay tangled in sheets damp with sweat, his fingers traced the scars on my back, not with pity, but with reverence. "These are badges of honor," he said quietly. "Proof that you survived, that you protected our daughter when no one else would. Our daughter." The simple phrase brought fresh tears to my eyes. "I want more," I confessed, the words escaping before I could reconsider them. "More children. A brother or sister for Lily." Dante's hand stilled against my skin, his eyes finding mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "You would bear my children?" The vulnerability in the question broke my heart a little. For all his power, all his wealth, he still couldn't quite believe that I had chosen him completely. "Yes," I whispered, bringing his hand to my stomach. "I want to carry your child, Dante. I want to build a family with you." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds, rare and breathtaking. "Then we'll start trying immediately," he declared, rolling me beneath him once more. "I'm a very determined man, Elena. I always get what I want." I laughed, the sound light and free in a way I hadn't felt in years. "So I've noticed." Later that morning, as Dante and I sat at breakfast with Lily babbling happily between us, I caught him watching us with an expression I'd never seen before. Contentment, perhaps, or something close to peace. "What are you thinking?" I asked, reaching across the table to take his hand. His fingers interlaced with mine, strong and steady. "That some men spend their lives accumulating wealth, power, territory, believing these things will fill the emptiness inside them." His eyes met mine, dark and sincere. I was one of those men, until I found something worth more than all of it. "And what's that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. His gaze moved from me to Lily, then back again, his expression softening in a way few people would ever witness. "A family to protect," he said simply. "A reason to come home." As I looked at him across the breakfast table, this dangerous, complicated man who had killed for us, who would kill again without hesitation if necessary, I realized we had both found what we truly needed. He had found something worth more than power. I had found something better than safety. We had found each other. 6 weeks later, I became Elena Salvatore in a small ceremony overlooking the Mediterranean at Dante's villa in Sicily. Lily, resplendent in a white dress that matched mine, threw flower petals with reckless abandon and called Dante Papa for the first time. That night, as we stood on our private terrace under a canopy of stars, Dante's arms encircled me from behind, his hand splaying possessively across my still flat stomach. "My wife," he murmured against my neck, the words filled with satisfaction. My family. I leaned back against his solid strength, feeling safer and more cherished than I'd ever imagined possible. The scars on my back no longer burned with shame, but spoke of a journey that had led me here, to this man, this life, this unexpected happiness. No regrets? He asked, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. I turned in his arms, reaching up to frame his face with my hands. None, I promised, meaning it completely. Every scar, every struggle, every moment of fear, they were all leading me to you. His kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise of protection that would never falter, of possession that would never waver. And as the stars shone overhead and the Mediterranean waves crashed against the rocks below, I surrendered completely to the truth I'd been fighting since the first moment I saw him. Some cages weren't meant to be escaped. Some were meant to be called.
Oh. I'm sorry to hear it, Noah. What color was it? Ugh. Petite, it's such a good song. Red. Oh my god. No. Devastating. Sorry. Rip. Oh, sorry for your loss. Who said you're allowed to look this ravishing? Stop. Dobby, stop that. Stop. Paint the jeans. True, paint the jeans. There you go. Paint the jeans. Emmy's always got good ideas, to be fair. Oh, so that wasn't dry. So it turns out these ones take a little longer to dry. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. Good to know. Good to know. Gonna head out and attempt to dye my hair. What? How are you dyeing it? What are you doing? What are you doing? Exciting. Also go if you gotta go. Yay. Hair dye is always so exciting to me. There's more to that message. Yeah, my glasses are off, and even I can see this inexplicable level of beauty. All mine are on, so we've switched out. French teacher. What? Copper and teal. Or oxidized penny hair. Fucking love. I want to see this. Let's go. I hope it's perfect. You lean into the distressed artist look. Yeah, exactly. Those ones won't dry as quickly because you have to mix the pigment with the liquid. That's what it is. Yes, that is what we were talking about. So the shakingness of it is what makes it dry. This is good to know. That's what it is. And now I will remember, theoretically. Let's take a little peek ski in here. There's so many colors and I don't know how I'm going to be able to tell which ones I want. Okay, that's pretty similar to the color I had. Cool. Okay. I went on a hike early this morning. Oh my god, that sounds so nice. I wanna go on a hike. Turkish coffee and food after. Yum. Okay. That's quite nice.